This is Stephanie at Hightower Stitching with today's tutorial. Today's tutorial is Quilter Meets the 1/4 inch challenge. I had a new quilt kit with a beautiful pattern with 2 different blocks in it, and I was starting it. When I got to the second block, I noticed some things. First of all, I'd have to cut strips width of the fabric, sew 3 different strips together, and once they were sewn together, to use a template, this diamond template, to cut each strip 9 times to get 9 diamonds out of it. To do this for all 19 sets, then I'd have 168 diamonds. And then I noticed when I had cut with my material, the kit contained just enough for the initial strips. There was small room for error. So I got to thinking about all the things I've learned, and I decided better be careful this time because I don't want to mess it up. So when looking at my cutting table, well, first of all, I pressed my pieces as well as I could, and they weren't too thick, so I could lay them on top to cut multiples. But one of the things that I had learned was always use the same. If you start using one ruler to cut your pieces, use that same ruler the whole time. And so I used this yellow one. I said I'm going to make sure that I do that. And I had to cut a piece that was 1 1/2 inch, and then 1 1/4 and 1 1/4, and sew those together. And my goal was to end up with a strip similar to this that I could take my diamond shape and set it on there and have it really close. Not too narrow and not too wide, because I didn't want to have to cut off any of the excess on there. And I'll tell you, when I finished all the cutting, because I was so careful, I found that I only had 5 of the diamonds that I had to trim some extra off. I didn't have any that were too small. So first of all, it started with the good cutting. Make sure you cut carefully. Use a sharp rotary cutter. And then I went to the sewing machine for the next part. So then I was ready to start on the sewing machine, and I knew that the next important part was going to be the 1/4 inch seams. And I've tried different things. I've used the index cards to try and make sure that I was going the right way. I have tried taking the painter's tape and putting it over the top of my bobbin cover, and that worked pretty good for a while. And then I tried using the stickums and layered stickums to do it, and I said, okay, I'm going to come up with something else this time. So what I did is I just took off the bobbin cover, and the bobbin cover has all the different measurements on it, the basic ones. And I said, I'm going to take and put my piece of blue tape so that I can spot the 1/4 inch right there before the 3/8. And I had a light colored bobbin. That was nice, but the blue was going to make it show up. And so I popped that back in there. Now sometimes I can't see the bobbin, but when you run out of thread, you're going to run out of thread, and that happens. And I'd rather see my 1/4 inch. So I was able to bring this over and line it up with that mark, because I could see it so well, that white mark that blue was making show up. And I was able to go ahead and sew my strips together. I did that one, and then I did the next one. After sewing together about 5 sets, I really started getting bored, and I said, okay, I'm going to go do some pressing and some cutting. So I took my initial strips back to the ironing board, and the first thing I did was I ironed the seam to set the seam, and I did that to both of those parts. Then I turned them over, and I wanted it to lay flat. The directions said to press it to the top but I just like it when it lays flat. I think it looks better. So I went through each seam and I did it open and pressed it, and then pressed the next one and pressed the next one. And then I started holding my breath. And so after about 2 ironings of strips, I said, okay, I'm going to the cutting board. So I went back to the cutting board. I laid my strip down, put my diamond template on it, and to my joy, to my real joy, it was so close, and I was ready to cut, and I could get the 9 out of there. So still, I only did a few strips at a time, ironed them, and came and cut them. So to meet the challenge, be sure that you press your material before you cut it. Be sure that you use the same ruler when you start cutting your strips. Figure out the method that you like that makes it possible for you to make a 1/4 inch seam on your particular sewing machine. Then do some pressing. Press your seams to set them, and then either press them in the direction the directions tell you to go, or open your seams like I like to. And I was tickled pink because I only, like I said at the beginning, I only had 5 that I needed to trim off to make sure that they would match the other diamonds. So next time you get started, tell yourself, I can meet that 1/4 inch challenge. This is Stephanie at Hightower Stitching.